Dreams. A manifestation of what we keep deep in our subconscious. It's vivid, exaggerated, and sometimes grotesque. But what if it's trying to tell us something? Something sinister? Would you be willing to go and find answers? Special thanks to Reddit user Ain Waditi for granting me permission to use their story. And so, my good people, relax and do enjoy the show. I have always been afraid of horror movies. In my entire life, I have watched one. That too over the period of 6 days. My dreams are enough to haunt me. Sometimes, I see myself burning in the middle of a street while others watch. And other times, I feel the water flooding my lungs as a stranger drowns me in the ocean. One thing is constant. I always wake up with a sweat. My story started a little over 5 months ago, when I started hiking to take my mind off things. It was a Sunday, and I was looking forward to get away from my family. After hiking for about an hour, I sat down to rest at my favorite spot. It was always perfect there. You could hear the river. The sun was bright, but there was plenty of shade. I used to sit there every day, humming to myself, comfortable with my own company. While I sat there, I heard a noise of a page being flipped. I turned around and saw a boy of my age sitting under a pine tree reading a book. Maybe I stared at him for longer than I intended to, because he looked up and smiled at me. I couldn't help smiling back. He had a great smile, one you couldn't ignore, but his face was intense, like he had seen some rough times. He walked towards me and introduced himself. His name was Ray, and his parents had just moved here. We exchanged numbers by writing them on leaves, and I found myself laughing a lot. By the time the sun set, I was half in love with him. When we were parting ways, he scribbled something on that book and gave it to me. Before I could see what he wrote, he smiled at me and jogged away. I blushed the entire way home and kept thinking about him. When I reached home, I opened the book to see what he wrote, and it just said 0302. I was confused but forgot about it soon. That night, something weird happened. I had a dream where I stood in the middle of some place in the woods. Nothing bad happened to me. Right in the middle of the ground I was standing on was an alarm clock. It started ringing loudly, and the time said 3:02. These weird dreams kept occurring for a month. Every time, there was a new addition to the dream. At first, a boundary wall started to form. Then after a while, there was a cabin. Soon the rooms in the cabin were decorated, but every single time, there was an alarm that went off at exactly 3:02. Meanwhile, I had tried to call him a couple of times, but the line was always disconnected. I thought maybe he had given me a bogus number, though I decided to try one last time before throwing his number out. This time, the phone rang. Once. Twice. And then suddenly, sounds of pages flipping. I started talking excitedly, and also half shouting at him because I couldn't reach him earlier. I went on for about 10 minutes before realizing he hadn't said a word. "Hello?" I said. "Do you think we can meet again sometime?" He said, "I'll see you soon," and hung up. I tried calling again to clarify, but the call didn't go through again. I found it weird and wondered what he meant by that. The same night, I fell asleep almost instantly thinking of him. In the dream, we were hiking together when he took me to a place in the woods which, to my surprise, was the exact same cabin I had dreamt of. He took me inside and told me how he had been through a tough time in his life, and he needed help. I told him I would be there for him, no matter how bad things got. "Promise?" he asked. "Promise." And just then, he looked at me and smiled the way he did when we first met. He got up and told me he had to show me something. He took me to a room on the west end of the cabin and gave me a key that had R written on it. He told me to open that door. I used the key to open the door, expecting it to be his bedroom, and unfortunately, it was. The only difference? Lying on the floor were 3 bodies that were slaughtered, and a body was hanging from the roof. After recovering from the initial shock, I looked around to see their faces, and to my horror, one of the bodies belonged to Ray. I screamed and woke up. Lying in my hands was a key with the letter R written on it. I called the police, not knowing what to do, and told them about my dream. They didn't want to believe me, but seeing how hysterical I was, decided to follow me into the woods. I tried my best to recall the way to the cabin in the woods. It took us 2 hours, but there it was. My blood ran cold and the expression of the officers changed. They called for backup and decided to go in. The cabin had been abandoned for years and only one door was locked. The key in my hand fit the lock perfectly, and inside lay 4 rotten bodies. I fainted and woke up later in a hospital. They found a watch on the hand of a body, which they recognized as Ray. The time on it was 3:02. The police believe the father killed both his children and his wife after he came home drunk after losing his job. The watch shattered when Ray had struggled. The father later hung himself. I don't know how I got the key, but funnily enough, I don't get nightmares anymore.